Hey, my name is Jake Havron, a business strategist for small business owners, Fortune 500 CEOs, and even national speakers. I'm thrilled to be part of 180 Elevate's series dedicated to fathers. It takes a village to raise a child, and it takes supportive community for dads to feel empowered to take on the daily challenges and make an impact in our world. 180 Elevate is a social networking platform to connect, grow, and give world-class experts and influencers. And we dedicate this month of June to fathers, and in its honor, we present to you conscious dad leaders, influential leaders who have been struck a beautiful balance between navigating their career success and figure out conscious parenting. Conscious parenting is the concept of creating an ideal parenting environment for you and your child to develop physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Let's hear how Burgess Kakaria does it. He is the CMO of Sensla and former CTO of Intel.
Everybody, welcome to this episode of Elements to Elevate by 180 Elevate. Each month, we will laser focus and dig deeper into an area of particular life and theme, which we truly believe is an element to uplift our perspectives and humanity. From insights to action, the path to elevate your mind, body, and soul starts here. In today's episode, our conscious dad leaders, our guest is Burgess. Welcome. You have an incredibly elevated background, and I'm excited to talk to you. How are you?
Hi, Nikki. Great to be here. Thanks for having me over.
Fantastic. Likewise. From your journey of being the former CTO of Intel Enterprise to the current founder of RoboCuisine and the CTO of Sensia, please do take us on how you navigated your personal and professional life to the person you are today. Our audience would love to understand that.
Sure. My life starts back in another country, so I'm a first-generation immigrant. I come from India with a different set of values, close family, close, loving friends. Came here, found this society extremely welcoming, but the best thing was the work culture, the people around me, and how multi-talented, multifaceted everyone was. I grew my career doing a lot of different things in the core area of computers, my specialty of technology, to where I am at now. And the one thing that truly defined consistently what my career was, that was change. Every few years, it was learning, it was growing, it was changing, and it was expanding my horizons, my knowledge, and my experience.
And where would you say the idea of mixing technology, which is more B2B, versus RoboCuisine, which is more B2C, came in, and you're at this intersection where you're doing both? How did you land here, and what do you have next for yourself?
Well, it's a very interesting question. It really started from the culmination of me thinking I wanted to actually help humanity in whatever way I could, using my skills as a technologist, as an inventor, as an entrepreneur. I am, generally speaking, lazy as far as house chores are concerned. And that really forced me to look at what are the things I really love but hate doing. So love getting the advantage of, but hate doing myself. And cooking was on top of the list, so was laundry and driving and so on. And I looked at using my technology skills to solve one of those problems, which was cooking. So in general, I would say my core skill set is using technology for problem solving, whether it is targeted at enterprise problems or at consumer problems. They are essentially a similar pathway.
And we hear now you are a new father of a beautiful baby girl, so congratulations on that new phase of life as well. How do you feel, and how are you balancing doing these multiple professional endeavors with your personal life at the moment?
Oh my God, yeah. I'm so excited here to be on the conscious dad leaders because like 7 weeks back, I would have been like on maybe a conscious leader, but not something that had the word dad in it. So I have a beautiful, amazing 7 week old baby. Every time I see her, I play with her, I squeeze her. It energizes me, so it doesn't like drain me by any means. And I've always loved taking on a few different things, right? I feel like to be well rounded and well balanced in your life, you have to learn how to have a proper work life balance. You have to know how to do master juggling act of life, right? So I've generally always had that, and now I'm able to repurpose it to something that's been one of the most incredible and amazing moments of my life. But it comes down to having to prioritize, like, what is important, like, how to like uh, put things in buckets and then manage those buckets one at a time, essentially.
So, to give us maybe 2 to 3 pointers you learned from your own family growing up, in this different part of the world you're talking about, and what you would love for your baby girl to take away as she grows up in the other part of the world now.
Well, I think there is a benefit whenever you travel, you gain wisdom, is my philosophy. Whenever you live in another culture and you live in another country for a slightly extended period of time, you gain a perspective that is just so immense and such a huge growth experience. I hope I can impart some of that to my baby uh, firsthand as storytelling. But then I also hope that I can have her afford the same benefits of immersing herself in different cultures over her lifespan, right? And be exposed to multiple different types of societies, what's different value systems, what's different things that are important, appreciated, etc. So my hope is she gets the same experience, if not a lot better experience at multicultural immersion.
So let's talk about your different experiences and what you would want to tell the young professionals that have just started working. We're seeing a lot of younger generations that are coming into the workforce, particularly women and even actually men, being this Father's Day episode, trying to prioritize having their professional life over personal, maybe not choosing to be a parent in the grander scheme of things, or thinking that they would have to sacrifice quite a bit in order to get to the next phase of life. What would you want to tell those folks? What tips and pointers would you have if they want to really consider having that work-life balance, or they're considering making that decision on their own?
Perfect. I'll start off with something that I heard, which was super impactful for me once, which is learn to differentiate between the rocks, the pebbles, and the sand. In many cases, people think the rocks are your work and your career advances, your promotions, things like that. Maybe pebbles are your social life, and sand is your family, and you try and fit in as much as you can. And generally speaking, that's the reverse of where I would. My role models are the people who have the reverse philosophy, where the rocks are their family, their loved ones. The pebbles are their social interactions, their networks, things like that. And the sand is, the work that you do, your professional career. And once you get that balance right and you understand the big bits from the things that you need to fit in between, I think it makes life a lot easier because now you are generally happy. And when you're happy, you're not burnt out. You don't feel like there is a work life balance issue because work is not work, it's fun.
And so, speaking of fun and work, how do you think being a parent has changed, even though it's only been a few months, or even let's say less than a couple months? How do you think you've changed as a leader, being a parent? What highlights would you want us to know about it?
You know, I could kind of empathize, but not at a deep and real level when I would see parents, mostly mothers, having to share the burden of taking care of a baby while being on a Zoom call, the kid coming, them being like frazzled and trying to like, apologize and, uh, think like there was something bad that they were like,
Yeah.
perpetuating. And for me, that's been such a learning experience. I see I'm in the middle of a meeting, the baby's crying, and at least till date, I have decided that I want to embrace that. I want to not be
Yeah.
embarrassed by having to take care of a baby. I want to be proud. I want to have baby kind of be my backdrop. I would rather keep baby than a plant or a plant, but you know, something that essentially enriches the experience. But until I actually experienced that, I could never really empathize, and that's been the biggest change, I think, when I see the real meaning of work-life balance.
So becoming a parent has made you more of an empathetic leader. That's the way
100%,
to
hundred
really
percent.
put it.
Yeah.
And what about your life outside of being a father or your social life? Let's talk a little bit about your spouse and how things have changed in terms of work-life balance with your spouse and in our digitally connected world. What pointers would you have for our audience who's new parents consistently, trying to juggle between that and the love of their significant other?
You know, I cannot uh, explain how blessed I feel that I got a baby in what would generally be extremely unfortunate and turbulent times. But it afforded both me and my spouse Parinas to essentially be stay-at-home parents, to be able to uh, have to juggle things like, Wi-Fi bandwidth, and who's speaking loudly in which room, and like who gets disturbed by whom, and who gets to take care of the next feed and so on. But I cannot imagine how much more complicated that is if I had to actually go to work, if I had to travel consistently and constantly like I used to. So some of that is
Yeah.
just feeling blessed, like I get this kind of opportunity. I understand not everyone does, and not every field is able to afford that luxury to the people that work in that field. But definitely, it's something that's been amazing, and I see firsthand. No matter how involved you are, you can never be a mom. I mean, like I wouldn't like to admit it, but my
No,
spouse
it's-
beats me hands down as being an incredible parent, like who is so much
Oh.
better at juggling, and I think just so much better at doing all of these things than I can ever be. But I
And
learned
I
from her.
I can personally attest to her, to that, knowing her. She's a wonderful human being, and you're very lucky to have her. And actually, vice versa. You both are very beautiful for each other. So let's do a couple of takeaways in terms of life lessons. Let's talk about your personal journey from college to career. What would be one or two life lessons you want our audience to take away? And if you do want to say something personally as well that you've learned from Bombay or from here, being here personally, a couple of life lessons that are your key learnings that you'd want, if you were a mentor, to really relay to the rest of the world so they can feel inspired and influenced by you.
And I might sound slightly spiritual, but it is the way I feel. I feel like people should embark on a pursuit of happiness, follow your passion as far as careers are concerned, do things which excite you, which keep you happy, versus trying to pursue like goals of career titles or money, or like, like going up the corporate ladder. I think people sometimes, uh, are not able to understand the benefit that type of thinking will have if you inculcate it early on. And I just happened to fall into a career that I just loved. I loved computers as a kid, and I happened to then realize, oh, I could make a career out of it. And but sometimes people uh, are not that lucky, and they need to put conscious effort in figuring out what really makes them happy, and what really makes them happy in a way that's sustainable as a career as well.
And I think when the quote I've heard is, you never work a day in your life if you enjoy what you're doing. And it's important for folks to know that you're juggling two C-suite titles, founder of Robo Cuisine in the consumer world, and then obviously the C-suite title at Sensia, a fantastic startup. So you're able to do it because you enjoy what you do, versus someone else who does it might be feeling overwhelmed with just one profession to do, which is also okay, but it's a great tip for today. So if we were to end with one quote of yours that you would see on a billboard, or one life quote you want to leave us with, what would that be?
Well, I'll circle back to happiness is also not doing what you like, but liking what you do. Uh, that essentially is also a life belief. So the pursuit of happiness in many ways is being at peace, being at comfort, having a moderation between ambition and content, hearts that actually makes you, I believe, very, very, very successful in the long term, but also like emotionally, you're a much better human being. So that's my favorite quote.
I agree. I agree. Happiness or anything in life is just a vision. It's a way of how you perceive it. Shift your perspective, elevate your life is what we say at 180 Elevate for that very reason. And on the heels of it, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking with you, Burgess, and congratulations again.
Thank you, Nikki. My pleasure being here.
Well, thank you, Nikki. That was a beautiful conversation with Burgess. Conscious dad parenting. That was amazing.
I know. He is such a funny individual, charismatic and smart, all in one package. So it was definitely a great conversation. We had some good pointers and a lot of good fun. One of my favorite parts was he is a nomad in terms of wanting to always look for activities, travel the world, gain different experiences, and he wants that for his daughter as well. And so it was cute how he brought that into the picture as a new dad, of giving her the experiences and the learnings that he actually learned in turn by being a world traveler. It's amazing to really get to know the different cultures and change your perspective from that angle. It's very important, I think, in today's world to navigate the different countries and experiences.
But at the same time, what I loved was that he was so content with being at home during this time. He mentioned that this whole time was such a blessing because he could truly connect with his wife and his newborn, which is absolutely phenomenal at this age. So,
and it is all about perspective, right? So COVID is, of course, an unfortunate event in the history of the world, and it depends on how you look at it. For him, perspective is key. He talks about the pursuit of happiness leading to a lot of different sad experiences, and just elevating yourself by changing your perspective so you're not pursuing happiness but you're truly content and happy within is so important. Honestly, if you shift your perspective on how you look at things, life teaches you great lessons, and I think you'll be a much happier human being overall. And that's the motto he lives by, truly, and I love that. Absolutely.
fabulous. And his acknowledgement to his wife is all a woman needs.
Yes.
So that was absolutely breathtaking for me, because he said, I could never do what she does. And sometimes you just have to let the lady know that. And being a dad is all about the co-creation and doing it together with your partner. And that was beautiful.
It truly was. Thank you, Burgess, for being on our segment, and happy Father's Day to everyone.
Happy Father's Day. It's time to express the best parts of your personality and step into authentic leadership and influence. Coming up next, we have a masterclass to explore your personality type and capitalize on your natural strengths, led by CEO of Silver Brand Consulting, Carrie Weaver. Welcome, Carrie.
Leveraging the best parts of your personality can lead to greater influence and personal power. But how did I get there? Let's first talk about what career professionals really want. It's my experience in being an executive coach after 15 years in corporate HR as a executive myself that all career professionals want the same thing. They want to make impact in an organization they care about, working with people that they like, ideally making good money, and doing all of that without losing their sanity and having some semblance of a healthy work-life balance. Well, if everybody wants that, it's because they don't have it to begin with. And why is that? Well, it's that people lack two types of power. They lack personal power in their ability to set a vision and have clarity for the life and career that they want to be leading, and or they don't have the boundaries set up to be able to say no when things don't align to that vision. It's also possible that you lack organizational power. Maybe your organization is huge and no one is listening to you, or maybe it's small and you just don't feel like you have the ability to influence people to the outcomes that would help you feel like you could have that greater work-life balance and the impact that you're really looking for. So it's really a lack of power that keeps us in the malaise of the day to day and really victim to the circumstance of our life when we're just going through the motions. And when we don't have power, it can lead to anxiety and stress. We can dread going to work. That lessens our productivity and achievement. All kinds of negative interactions and difficult relationships can spur out of that. And then at the end of the day, we're really talking about having lower emotional engagement in our life, more health issues, lower quality of life, and ultimately unhappiness. And this is very painful. And unfortunately, lots of career professionals are living, eating, and breathing day to day just like this, with a total and utter lack of personal or organizational power. I have some good news though, and it's all about power, influence, and leadership. You see, power is the ability of one person to influence another. And leadership, interestingly, is about the ability to motivate and inspire others into action. And using this definition of leadership, literally anyone can be a leader. In fact, we lead ourselves. So leadership is a process of influence. Therefore, if we want greater power, we can have greater influence. Now, social psychologists will tell us that influence falls into 4 different buckets, or the 4 C's of influence. And those who are influential have all 4 of these things. They are competent, they are confident, they are committed to the organization, because if they weren't, they wouldn't be influential, and they are well connected with other people that have power and influence. Now, a lot of people think influence is one skill, and that's not true. It's many. We are going to be talking about personality and how to leverage your personality for greater influence. How can we use personality to maximize influence and power in an organization? Well, our personality really is our compass. It's how we take in information and make decisions. It allows us to live in alignment and integrity with our most authentic self. And so therefore we can create new opportunities, make decisions, and achieve our goals, all by leveraging the very best parts of who we naturally are instead of trying to be someone that we're not. When we do this, it creates a sense of personal pride, which leads to satisfaction. Then we can self-validate as opposed to having to look for external validation. And when we can really self-validate and have esteem and self-love, that's the creation of happiness. Happiness is an inside job, not an external job, or not something that lives outside of ourselves. So let's talk about the father of personality. This goes all the way back into the 1920s, when Carl Jung, who is a Swiss psychiatrist and often known as the father of personality, started looking at differences in people and realizing that there were differences, but there weren't hundreds and thousands and millions and billions of differences as there were people on the planet. And so he started to create forms and patterns and types. And what he was able to do was determine that every person carries out 2 types of mental processes: the way that we take in information, and then after we noodle on that information in our brain, we make decisions. Everyone does these 2 things, but we do these things in different ways. The other thing that was so important about Carl Jung's work was he observed there's really two things going on here: the outer world and the inner world. The outer world of things, people, and events, and the inner world of thoughts, feelings, and reflections. What the work of Carl Jung ultimately transpired into was the Myers-Briggs type analysis. It's a behavioral assessment. It's not a test. There's no right or wrong. It's been around for over 70 years. It is valid in that it measures what it is supposed to measure, and it is reliable in that consistently the results are repeatable over and over. What the Myers-Briggs instrument is trying to measure is what your inborn personality was, what the nature was. And for those of you that have little people in your lives that are maybe parents or aunts and uncles, and you've seen little babies, they develop their personalities pretty much right away. We even see this in pets. The same type of breed of dog doesn't have the exact same personality, and we start to see personality in pets and mammals form right away. That's what the Myers-Briggs is trying to measure. And again, when we can understand who we are at our core, what is our inborn natural preference, we can be in greater flow and alignment and stop trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. And so instead of having all the dis-ease and anxiety and stress that we were previously talking about, we can create greater influence and power in our own lives if we are in alignment with who we naturally are as a human being. So let's talk about the MBTI, otherwise known as the Myers-Briggs type indicator. It is measuring on 4 dichotomies, which is a fancy way of saying 2 ends of a spectrum. And most of us are familiar with introversion and extroversion. Then there's sensing and intuition, thinking and feeling, and judging and perceiving. Just briefly, some quick theory about MBTI. There are 4 pairs of opposites. We all use both sides. We do all things, but usually one is our natural preference. The MBTI instrument was designed to indicate what your inborn preference was. It wasn't meant to put people in a box. It wasn't meant to say one type is better than another. And it's not used to measure skill. In fact, you can become quite good at something that has nothing to do with your personality. So the caution that I would give you as a certified Myers-Briggs professional instructor is that you should never use Myers-Briggs in a hiring decision, because someone's personality can really be indifferent to whether or not they could be excellent at a job. So we don't want to limit people in any way ever when thinking about personality. That said, it can be really helpful to understand who we are at a deeper level. So let's dig into it more. We're actually going to do a self-assessment. And this is something that I'm qualified to do, again, as a certified Myers-Briggs instructor and trainer. And so get a piece of paper if you don't have one already, and we're going to go through the dichotomies, and you're going to self-assess which you are. The first dichotomy we're going to start with is extroversion and introversion. This has nothing to do with whether or not we like people or not. It's how we direct and receive our energy and how we get recharged. So in other words, people who have a preference for extroversion are energized by interacting with what Carl Jung would have called the outside world: things, places, peoples, and events. They also like to take action. They're often doers. Now, those who have a preference for introversion are energized by thoughts, feelings, and reflections, usually in quiet situations where they can regroup, right? Again, has nothing to do with whether or not you like people. It's where we get our energy and are recharged. Now, humans have to do both of these things, but we usually do one with a greater ease and a greater comfort. So this next slide is a word association list. There's going to be words that appeal to you on both sides, but I want you to pick the one that resonates more deeply, more often, and what feels like the true you. Not when you're around, family and friends that you feel obligated to be there, or in a work environment where you feel uncomfortable. Think about situations with family and friends who you deeply love and can be yourself, or environments where you really feel comfortable. That's the you we're trying to get here. So don't overthink it, don't underthink it. Just look at the list and pick either an E or an I and write it down on your paper. Next, we have sensing and intuition. This is all about the way that we take in information and the kind of information that we trust. So those who have a preference for sensing like to focus on what is real, tangible, right here, right now, things that they can experience through the world. That's why it's called sensing. What can I touch? What can I taste? What can I validate that I know is true right here, right now? Those who have a preference for intuition are often focused on the future. They're big picture thinkers, they're often creative and insightful, and they really use intuition, gut instincts, to connect the dots and make meaning that way. Now, again, we do both of these things. We have to, but we typically prefer and trust one of these styles more than another. Let's take a look at the word association list. Just like before, you're going to find words on both sides that resonate, but pick an S or an N that resonates with you most of the time and feels like the true you. The third dichotomy is thinking or feeling. This is the way, after we've taken in information, either sensing or intuition, that we conclude and come to decisions. So those who have a preference for thinking make their decisions based on impersonal, objective logic, right? Something that they can analyze and realize that there's a framework or a logic to it, that there's a process to the thinking, versus those who prefer feeling tend to make their decisions with people and relationships as the priority. Now, it's really important to note that both of these processes are totally rational. There's nothing irrational about feeling. We are emotional creatures. We all have feelings. In fact, it would be quite irrational if we were robotic and weren't having any feelings and decisions. So again, you're going to do both of these things, but one is going to come with greater ease than another, or feel more natural, as it were. Here's the word association list. I want you to look at this and think about which feels more like you more of the time. This dichotomy in particular, thinking versus feeling, tends to be the hardest for people to choose from. And if that's feeling true for you, the last member on the list here, equity equaling all or equity equaling the individual, can often be the deal breaker for people if you're kind of stuck on the line. And so let's talk about what that means. If I'm a thinker, so to speak, I'm going to think of equity as two parts of a whole, right? So if I have two people in the zombie apocalypse that have to go out and fight zombies later, and we're rationing food, and it's me and you, and there's one sandwich, the thinker is going to say, there's two people, one sandwich, cut it in half, right? That's what a thinker would do. It's totally logical. It is absent of personal traits and relationships and all the rest of it. Now, the feeler in that same situation in the zombie apocalypse would look at the sandwich and want to know what's going on with the two people here. Well, Carrie, you actually fought zombies earlier in the day and you don't have to go out this afternoon. So, and I do, maybe I should take a little bit more than half of the sandwich, right? The feeler is always putting the personal context around every situation. Again, they're both totally rational. They both make sense to people as they're doing them. And we both do both of these things all the time, but it's usually where we start our process. All right. So hopefully that was helpful in getting you to think through which is your preferred style of making decisions, using the more objective approach or using the more personal style. All right. Now, last but not least is the dichotomy of judging or perceiving. Now, this is a little bit of a misnomer because judging doesn't mean you're judgmental and perceiving doesn't mean you're particularly perceptive, but just go with the terms because they've been around a really long time. What it has to do with is how we approach the outside world. So as it relates to J's, or those who have a preference for judging, they are often organized, orderly, decisive people. They see the world as something that can be controlled, managed, and decided. Those who have a preference for perceiving are flexible, open-ended, spontaneous, and options-oriented. They're usually pressure prompted, and deadlines work well for them because they like to stay open and flexible until right at the last minute when they'll come together and make a final decision. So again, we do both of these things, but usually not with equal comfort. And the truth on this one is people that are on one end of the dichotomy versus the other often honor and appreciate and sometimes wish they were the other way. And you'll see that more in the word association list here. So those who have a preference for judging are organized, decisive, they tend to control, they like to have closure on decisions, they can be deliberate, they're planners. versus perceivers are flexible. They like information and resources. They like to experience the world. They'll make a decision later, if at all, but they're spontaneous and they like to wait on things because what if the best decision comes right at the last moment in time, right? So as I've described these, probably one side of the dichotomy stressed you out a little bit more than the other, right? So again, don't pick your aspirational side, pick the one that really feels the most like you. Now, you should have had 4 letters, E or an I, an S or an N, a T or an F, or a J or a P. All the different combinations of those 4 types can equal out to be 16 different personality types. So that is the Myers-Briggs. And doing a self-assessment, just like we did, is a perfectly reasonable way to come up with your personality. You don't actually have to take the assessment. So congratulations, you should now know your MBTI personality type. And what is important to do with this information? Once you know it, look it up, do a little fact finding, and figure out what are the hobbies and interests and career orientations that are best suited for you. Are you living in alignment with your personal strengths? And if not, are you that square peg in a round hole? And how can you get more in flow and more in line with your true inborn personality? Because that's what feels like the best, because that's just us being us. And there are all sorts of careers in which we can align, or roles and duties that we can do in our careers that really light us up and make us feel really good. My name is Carrie Weaver. Again, I am the CEO of
Thank you for
Silverbranch
joining
Consulting,
us
a
today
boutique leadership
and
development
elevating
company
yourself.
that teaches emerging
Charity
executive women the
should
12
begin at home,
science-backed
but should
skills
not
needed to
stay there.
influence their
At
way
180
into the
Elevate,
C-suite.
it is our
If you
honor to
liked this
support
particular
local
course,
and global
I would love to
philanthropies
connect with you
which
on LinkedIn.
make
You
an
can find
impact
me at
on the
Carrie
lives
A.
of our
Weaver,
beautiful
and you
children
can also go to
and the
my
world in
website,
of itself.
Silverbranch Consulting,
What
to
would this
learn
world
more.
look like
I
if
hope
we
you
all
enjoyed the
felt cared for?
content.
Let's
Be well.
co-create that new paradigm. If you would like to consider joining our philanthropic mission, please consider donating at 180elevate.com. And next is just a glimpse into one of the many philanthropies our organization supports.
The journey of Karuna Thodi Masti Thodi Padhai began last year when the pandemic shook the world and India went into lockdown. It was very important to keep the children safe, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. What better way to do this than to engage the children creatively and make learning fun?
Karuna Thodi Masti Thodi Padhai started as a small initiative, but through the medium of a simple registration form, it grew into a massive network of 600 plus partners. These partners, along with our internal network, helped us reach 12,000 plus communities in 25 plus states. So far, 1,500 plus messages have been shared under the KTMTP series. Each message was carefully curated, contextualized, and disseminated in 10 regional languages along with English.